And we are live. Okay, welcome everybody to the social distance learning program. Tonight we're going to do Introduction to Range Safety, which is the first of 3 classes that the Liberal Gun Club has on offer in a number of places, including the great state of Oregon, where our teacher, Mike Ross, is. I'm Ed Gardner, and I'm going to shut up now and turn it over to Mike. If you have questions, put them in chat, and one of the moderators will grab them and ask them in a nice deep radio voice so that Mike can, treat them with the dignity they deserve.
Everyone, all my students, welcome to the social distance learning module, Introduction to Range Safety and Shooting. I'll be your host this evening, and I'm gonna put some slides up on the screen right now, things that we're going to be going over. Let me get this set up here. Okay, so this is an abridged version of this class. We're going to be ripping through some of these things. This is normally a class taught in person because it involves a live fire component at the range. Some things have been deleted, so ordinarily a 4-hour class is being compressed into just short of an hour here. So here we go. Oops, I'll start. Who am I? Again, my name is Mike Ross. I come from an anti-gun background. My first pistol purchase was in my 40s. I currently hold a concealed handgun license for the states of Oregon and Utah. I have a range of firearms experience in pistol, shotgun, and rifle. I like competing informally in sporting clays and bullseye handgun pistol competitions, as well as 3-gun competitions. My primary interests are in marksmanship and in teaching, and I am a Liberal Gun Club instructor. What is the Liberal Gun Club? There's some information for you to look up on your own, and this video will be posted on our YouTube channel. Subscribe if you can. Why are you here? Hopefully, a lot of you are new students. Maybe you just got your first firearm, a pistol or a rifle. Maybe you're here for general education. Maybe you want to learn more about firearms so you're not uncomfortable around them. Maybe you want to get a firearm for self-defense, or you're just simply interested in how firearms work. We're going to be going over safety in section 1, very brief and fast firearms overview, going over some different types of firearms. Then we're going to be getting into the meat of it, how to safely handle a handgun and basic marksmanship fundamentals, and then a little bit about range safety and etiquette for your first time at the range. Section 1, safety. We practice 3 rules of safety anytime we're at the range, anytime we handle a firearm, whether it's a local gun store or at home for cleaning, or whether you're shooting at the range. Number 1, always keep the barrel pointed in a generally safe direction whenever possible. 2, keep your finger off the trigger and alongside the frame until you are ready to shoot. And always remember that you are in control of a weapon. And if used negligently, it may injure or kill you or someone else. You may hear there are different rules. The NRA has 4 rules, one of which is assume that the gun is always loaded. We feel that 3 rules are easier to keep track of and follow those at all times. So during this teaching session, there are no loaded firearms around me. Right now, they're all unloaded. They all have their actions open. I have some what we call snap caps. These are fake rounds. I might be demonstrating these, how they go inside the firearm later on. All the safety rules are in effect. And if you have any firearms where you're watching, please don't handle them, don't touch them, put them away for the duration of this class. Also wanted to say a word about safe storage because many of you may be new firearm owners. Once you purchase a firearm, in order to keep it safe, some considerations you want to think about. Are there children in a house? Are there unauthorized users who may be coming into your home who you don't want near the firearms? Some locking options, if you can see on the small screen, are a cable lock such as this. Most firearms come with some kind of locking device or a padlock. This can be used in a revolver. And at the end of this slide, I will show you how those work. You'll also want to get some kind of a storage container, either a lockbox with a biometric safe or a combination or a key or a genuine safe. It's important to keep the ammunition separate from your firearms at home. And there's also a difference between storage and staging. Storage for your firearms is when you're not using it, it's to be put away until you want to take it to the range. Staging is if you have a firearm for self-defense, you want to put that in a location where it is safe but easily accessible. One option for doing that is have a loaded magazine next to or near the firearm in a locked container so that it could be quickly put into the firearm and be ready for use. Let's see, I'm going to stop this right now. So, to show, first, to demonstrate that the firearm is, I'm going to remove the magazine. The slide is back. This is a semi-automatic weapon. Looking inside the chamber, you can see and feel.
Mike, I didn't have the video spotlighted when you switched back over, so we got to see Scott staring sagely into the screen.
I was wondering about that. Okay, so chamber empty and the magazine out. And this is a locking device, a cable lock. It goes down through the action and locks underneath it. This prevents the magazine from being inserted, and it also prevents the slide from closing. And for revolvers, you can see the cylinder is open and empty, and a padlock can go through the cylinder like so and lock. And then that prevents the cylinder from closing and from ammunition being put in the cylinder in that space. So the gun cannot be fired. So a very brief firearms overview. First in the slide, and then some live pictures. Differences between firearms. A rifle is a long gun. This is meant to be fired from the shoulder. It has rifling in the barrel, those spiral grooves that go through the middle of the bore. It's in the middle of the barrel. This spins the bullet to stabilize it during flight. It makes it more accurate. A shotgun is also a long gun, meant to be fired from the shoulder generally. And it can fire a single projectile, which is called a slug, or multiple projectiles, which is called shot through the barrel, which is generally smooth. And a handgun, it could either be a revolver, which you just saw, or a semi-automatic pistol, which also you saw, meant to be fired generally with the hand. Less accurate handguns are generally for closer distances. So this are a couple of examples of rifles. There's a bolt action rifle on the top, it has a scope attached. And it appears to be an M1 carbine on the bottom, I believe. This is a semi-automatic World War II era rifle. And there's a pump action shotgun as an example. It comes in different gauges. Gauge refers to the size of the barrel, the diameter. The larger the barrel, the lower the number. So 12 gauge is larger than a 20 gauge, and an 8 gauge is a lot larger than a 12 gauge. I'm going to show you in a moment live the different features and parts of a handgun. This right here is a double action revolver. Look at that for a second. We'll go over the different features in a moment. And then this one in particular is a double action, single action, semi-automatic handgun. Now, you'll notice on this one, there's something called a safety decocker towards the back there. or safety slash decocker. Not all handguns have that, and we'll go into that in a little bit here. So I'm going to do some demonstration real quick and show you some of these. So an example of a rifle. This is a rifle. It's a very large weapon. You can see. This one in particular is a bolt action with an internal magazine. The ammunition goes in there. The bolt closes on the round, chambering it into the barrel, and it's ready to fire. This one has a safety on the back. It can be actuated with your thumb. That's ready to, that's safe. The bolt can't be moved and the trigger won't pull. And this also is a rifle. This is an example of an AR-15 rifle. This has a prismatic scope on the top. The latter has a magazine. This is where the rounds go. Unlike the previous one with an internal magazine, this is a removable external magazine. Here is an example of a shotgun. Again, the action is open, and we can see that it's empty. This is a break open over-under 12 gauge shotgun. And here is an example of a revolver. Now, they have a grip here, a hammer, the rear sight, the front sight, the cylinder where the cartridges go, an ejector rod that ejects spent cases after the round has been fired, a cylinder release that if you push it will allow the cylinder to pop out. This is for loading and unloading. A trigger guard around the trigger and the trigger itself. This is a semi-automatic pistol. This has an external magazine. Unlike the cylinder, the cartridges, the ammunition go in this magazine, which goes into, and you can see that it's unloaded because the rounds go there. It's spring-loaded. Goes into the frame, locks in place. This also has a front sight and a rear sight. This has a slide, this piece, and it goes back and forth to auto-load and eject the spent cases. It has a magazine release button that releases the magazine out the bottom, and a slide release lever that releases the slide and allows it to go forward or lock it back. Also a trigger guard and the trigger. Now you'll notice on this one, this has no manual safety. It has passive safeties, such as this little tab on the trigger, so that it cannot be fired unless intentionally. If you press it from the side, the trigger won't go. And it also has internal safeties. It's very safe, so it cannot fire if it's been dropped. A word about safeties and controls. Every firearm has its own unique setup. Sometimes the magazine release button, sometimes it's a lever next to the trigger guard. It can be ambidextrous. Sometimes it's on the other side. Likewise, safeties. Sometimes they're on the slide, sometimes they're in other locations. So in terms of safety, it's very important that you familiarize yourself with the firearm that you have. In particular, on this double action, single action revolver, there is no safety at all. Some would say these are inherently safe because in double action, the trigger is very hard to pull. It takes some effort. And the reason it's called a double action is that it's a two-step trigger. So the trigger has to do two things. One, to cock the hammer, and two, to release the hammer. If you cock the hammer yourself, now it's in single action mode and the trigger simply releases the hammer. Okay, are there any questions at this point?
And we would encourage people to post any questions in the chat.
Thank you, HK. Now I'm going to go back to the slides. So some of the unique things about semi-automatic pistols is they do have a slide and a slide lock and a magazine release and a magazine. Those differentiate themselves from a revolver, which has a cylinder and a cylinder release or loading gate if it's a single action, and an ejector rod.
Just a quick question, Mike.
Yes.
Does the Glock have a magazine safety?
Meaning,
I think he's asking if they have a magazine disconnect. So if you drop the magazine, can the gun fire? And I believe that all Glocks will fire with the mag out.
yes, it will fire with the magazine out. So no, it does not have a magazine disconnect. I know my Ruger 22 does. So to demonstrate, magazine goes in. Again, it is empty. There is no round in the chamber, so this is an empty pistol. The slide closes. I will drop the magazine, and it will fire with the magazine out.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's something that you're going to want to verify with any new semi-automatic handgun purchase, though. That's a really good question.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And
So,
one more question, Mike.
Yeah.
With regards to the racking of a semi-automatic, for someone who may not necessarily have the like a hand strength or have issues in terms of being able to rack a semi-automatic slide, would revolvers be preferable in this scenario?
possibly. Every semi-automatic pistol is different. Some are easier to rack than others. Some can be very stiff. And there are specialty models that have a softer spring that makes it easy to rack. For those with smaller hands or perhaps weaker hands, or maybe folks with arthritis possibly, I know I have a touch of that. One way to rack the slide is to use the meat of your hand rather than your fingers. So grasp across the back of the slide, and then you're using the more major muscle groups, like your arm, to pull it back. And for you new gun owners out there, it can be a little awkward and difficult to do when you first get a pistol. So practice is important. And also, we're going to go over loading and unloading of these in a little while, but it is critical that when you unload a semi-automatic pistol, dropping the slide does not make it safe necessarily, because there may still be a round in the chamber. And as this one, it does not have a magazine disconnect, so it will fire a round if there's one in the chamber if you pull the trigger with the magazine out. So drop the magazine and then rack the slide open, lock it open, and visually check the chamber to make sure there's nothing in there. And you can also check with your finger. Anytime you unload, certainly to make it safe, to store it, to clean it, always do those steps. So if there's no other questions, we will continue. Okay.
Hey, Mike, there was one that I got in a private chat that you might want to take.
Yes, sir.
It was a question about inside the waistband and not having a physical safety on a striker fire, is there a concern about negligent discharge?
There's always a concern about negligent discharge in the context of holstering, in the context of handling a weapon in any case. That's really beyond the scope of this class. So that really is for a different class.
I'll add to that just because I can.
It's a training issue.
It's a training issue, but it's also none of the modern firearms are going to go off unless you violate one or more of the rules rather. So fingers off the trigger until you're ready to shoot, and understand that it's possible to load it. But if your finger's not on the trigger, unless you've got a really stupid holster, you're not going to discharge the firearm while it's in the holster, regardless of whether it's in your waistband, out of your waistband, or sitting on the table.
Yes. Excellent point.
I just wanted to, seeing as it was around a safety issue, I thought it might be something you might want to talk about. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. So we're going to be moving on to handgun handling and marksmanship fundamentals. Kind of the meat of it. Breaking this down into grasp, stance, trigger control, sight picture, sight alignment, and loading and unloading the firearm. We're going to take these through the steps on the slides first, and then do a visual demonstration. Grasp for a semi-automatic weapon. So you want to, well, I'm going to go through these slides rather quickly. It's better to show. And these will be up on the video after this as well, so you can look at them at your leisure. So I'm going to stop this here and demonstrate what it was saying. The grasp. The webbing between your fingers and your thumb go high up on the frame in this little notch right here, wrapping your fingers around the grip with your thumb facing forward and your finger alongside the frame, as is a good safety practice. In this open space here, you're going to be putting the meat of your other hand right in that space, wrapping those fingers around over the other ones and aligning the thumb with the other one, pointing downrange, basically pointing where you want to shoot. This is proper grip, and you see that the entire grip of the pistol is covered in my hands. How strong to grip the pistol? Sorry, I have a cat. You want to grip it very firmly, but not so much that you're shaking. So a good way of telling is grip it as hard as you can until you start to tremor, and then back off from that. And your support hand grip should have a roughly equal amount of pressure on the grip. We're going to be going into more of the stance later. I want to address revolvers first. Revolver is similar with some differences. You want to grasp the grip as high on the grip as you can, but not so that you're overlapping the frame of the gun. That's the metal part. Again, fingers under the trigger guard, a nice strong grip. And in this instance, for a revolver, your thumb doesn't go forward. You want to curl it down like so. Your other support hand goes over, wrap your fingers around, and then place this thumb over the other one in a very firm grasp. So you're almost making a large fist around the grip of the pistol. Okay, start the slide again. And there we see what we were talking about with the grip, and then the support hand coming around the other side. Next is the stance. Both feet facing the target, hips square to the target, feet roughly shoulder width apart, knees slightly bent, your upper body leaning slightly forward at the waist, arms extended straight out, shoulders squared to the target, and shoulders rolled forward. Which I will now demonstrate. So, sorry. Knees shoulder width apart, feet shoulder width apart, knees slightly bent, leaning slightly forward, proper grip on the handguard, arms straight out, shoulders rolled slightly forward. Gun in the line of sight, looking at the target. So, like so. And the reason why, and this is a modification of what we call an isosceles stance. You're square to the target and you're roughly symmetrical. And it's a very stable stance. And it's also what your body wants to do naturally as you're prepared to face the threat. For example, you're slightly crouched, your arms are in front and you're facing what's coming at you. It's a good self-defense stance, and it's also a good shooting stance for basic shooting. So, trigger control with your trigger finger. If you can see, you want the trigger to be pretty much in the center, your pad, not too far on the tip and not too far back, but right in the center. And that will vary depending on the fit of the gun, because the grip can be larger or smaller, and everybody has different hand size and finger lengths. So your finger is naturally going to want to land at different locations on the trigger. You can slightly change your grip to accommodate depending. But you want your trigger press to be smooth and even towards the rear, straight back, almost as if you're pulling a string through the center of the barrel, as straight back as possible. Ideally, you will break the trigger until it snaps without moving the sights so it doesn't twitch. Follow through to reset all the way back, and then slightly let it go back until the trigger resets, keeping your finger on the trigger throughout the course of fire to maintain consistency. Don't move it in between shots.
Mike, just to go back to step 2, with
Yes.
regards to that particular stance, is that the one that one should be practicing for self-defense shooting as opposed to just target shooting at the range?
We teach that stance also in our self-defense courses. It is a very good stance for general target shooting, and it's a good fundamental stance. There are different types. There's a weaver, a modified weaver, where a person is slightly to the side with a strong arm straight. There's the classic bullseye shooting, one-handed. So this is for fundamentals and basics for a new shooter. It's recommended. It's very stable, and it also has other uses. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So I'll demonstrate a trigger pull here. Again, the gun is empty. Nothing in the chamber. So a smooth trigger pull. See, my finger it's not at the fingertip, and it's not coming too far through, but right on the pad, the center, a nice even squeeze all the way until the trigger breaks. And as you're starting, it should always be a surprise when the gun fires. There shouldn't be any anticipation, because if you anticipate, generally you're going to be jerking or pulling the trigger and affecting your aim. So a nice smooth trigger, and be surprised when the gun fires. So sight alignment, sight picture, and aiming. So number 1, find your dominant eye. Not everybody has a dominant eye. Some people don't, some people do. It's the eye that you naturally focuses on the thing that you're looking at. And there's a means of figuring that out through this exercise. Take a moment to read that. It's not terribly critical. You can read this later. I happen to be cross-dominant, meaning that I'm right-handed, but I'm left eye dominant. What that means is, as I'm looking at something, my natural tendency is to cant my head so that my dominant eye is looking down the sights of the gun. In the interest of time, I'm going to move past this. So, sight alignment. This has to do with aligning the sights on your pistol or revolver or long gun. Now you'll notice here that there's a certain geometry to this. The idea being that in the case of these sights, the level of the front sight is the same as the level of the rear sight. And the space in between, where you see the front sight through the rear sights on either side, is symmetrical. That is sight alignment. And I'm not sure if you can see, in this case, it would look something like that with this pistol. You see that the front sight is pretty much in the center of that rear sight notch and level across with the back of the sight. It's important to focus on the front sight when you're aiming, not the rear sight and not the target. It's kind of splitting the difference. So you focus on the front sight, the rear sight will be slightly fuzzy, and the target will be slightly fuzzy. It's the best way to get the best accuracy generally. Iron sights refer to the sights that come with the weapon. Sometimes they could be fixed, as with this pistol. Sometimes they could be, yes, fixed. Sometimes they could be target sights, as with this revolver. You'll see there's some screws in the top and a screw on the side.
Mike, I think you want to turn off the slides to show the sights.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. So these are target sights, and you see they're aligned right there. Proper sight alignment. That screw on top, that is an elevation adjustment. So if you move that screw, it will change the point of impact up or down on the target. And there's a little screw on the side. If you see there, that's called a windage adjustment, and that will adjust the point of impact left or right on the target. Why adjustable sights? It has to do with dialing in the gun so it's as accurate as possible. And it also has to do with distance, because the bullet has a trajectory. It doesn't shoot straight. It will fall over distance because of gravity. And if you're shooting at longer distances, the bullet will impact in a different location that your sights tell you versus if you're getting a very close shot. So that's why sometimes you want to adjust your sights. Okay. So here's an example of different sights, and they all have one thing in common: a certain geometric balance. So you see some of those should look familiar that you just saw. That one in the top right is an aperture sight, otherwise known as a peep sight. It has a little ball on top of the front sight and a little hole in the rear sight, and you just put the ball in the center of the hole. Now, aperture sights are a little neat. They're generally found on rifles, but they can be found on target pistols because the light actually bends through that aperture, and it could help you focus on farther targets because if you don't wear glasses. Sight picture. So on the left here, we see a center hold. That is the target that you're shooting for is directly kind of in the middle of the sight there. On the right is called a 6 o'clock hold, where the target is hovering just above your front sight when the sights are properly aligned. Depending on the adjustment, different pistols are going to have different settings for this. Most of mine actually are kind of set to a 6 o'clock hold, so they're most accurate. If I use a 6 o'clock hold, then that bullet will land in the center of the target. Okay. Step 5, loading and unloading. We're going to see how to load and unload a revolver and a semi-automatic pistol. So these slides are here, but I'm going to show this directly. I think it's easier. So with a revolver, in this case, a double action revolver, you open the cylinder with the cylinder release tab, press it and push the cylinder out from the other side. And these are dummy rounds. They're called snap caps. They're not live ammo. So you simply drop them into the cylinder one by one. I won't put them all in, like so. And then you close the cylinder until it snaps closed. And the gun is loaded. To unload a revolver, it's the reverse of this. Again, keeping your finger outside of off the trigger and alongside the frame. Push the cylinder release, pop the cylinder out, push the ejector rod, which is here, and it pushes the rounds out of the cylinder. And what it is, the ejector rod has this little star thing that catches the rim of the ammunition and it pushes them out. Now, sometimes it can be they can expand inside the cylinder, the empty cases, and a little shove to push them out helps them along.
Is there a particular order for loading this cylinder in chambers, or?
No, there isn't. The cylinder advances with the trigger pull. You can see it turning, and that's an issue of timing. So it turns with each pull of the trigger. So all of them get loaded, and then as you close it, you see the opening of the barrel right here. One of them is going to align with the barrel when you first close it, and then they will advance from there.
Would you recommend that a new firearm owner get some snap caps to practice loading and unloading?
Yes, snap caps are an excellent idea for dry fire practice. Dry fire is an excellent way of maintaining a good trigger pull, so that, I don't know if you can see, the gun is pointed in a safe direction, my fireplace in this instance, and it is unloaded. A nice smooth, even pull, and watch the end of the muzzle, and it shouldn't move very much as I'm pulling the trigger. So a nice steady trigger pull. And snap caps are great for that because it's fake ammo. It goes in and it makes a little snapping sound, and it helps to keep your firing pin from being damaged by slamming down on there's nothing there to hit. But please be sure and double check that you're putting in snap caps rather than live ammo. Double, triple check.
I've been advised to literally lock away live ammo when you're going to be doing any dry fire practice prior to doing any practice.
I think that's very sound. I think that's a very sound practice. Yes. Yeah, okay. I think that's a great idea.
Put it in a completely different room, lock it up, nowhere near the gun.
Yeah, there are many sound practices that you'll want to do anytime you handle a gun. Don't be impaired. If you're drinking, do it after the guns are put away and the ammo's put away. Don't drink before. Being impaired could mean whether you're smoking a joint, if you're taking too much prescription meds, you really need your full faculties when you're handling firearms or live ammo. And certainly when you're at home, live ammo shouldn't be anywhere near the firearm unless you're staging it for self-defense purposes. But on my work area here, there's no live ammo anywhere in this room. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Right, thank you.
Yes. So, loading a semi-automatic pistol. The magazine is out. The chamber is empty. And this one gets a magazine. It's spring-loaded. On the back of the magazine, there are little holes that tell you where, how many rounds are left in the magazine. For people who want to know, this in particular is a Glock 21. It's a semi-automatic 45 ACP caliber pistol. Again, these are dummy rounds. And what you do is you push it into the magazine. I don't know if we can see this. And it pushes right in there like that. And another one goes on top of the first one. It's a little awkward, this angle. I'm trying to show. I'll put 4 in. 3. So you push down and then push towards the back of the magazine. And then they go in there. And that's what it looks like. This is called a double stack magazine. So for better capacity, they kind of go side by side in there. They're held on there by those little steel lips. And it's spring loaded again so that as the slide comes forward on the return stroke after the gun has been fired, it strips one of these rounds off and loads it in the chamber. So we have the magazine. The bullet faces the front of the gun. It goes in like so. Push it in firmly so it clicks. And then the slide gets closed. I can either do that by pulling it back and it will automatically strip the round into the chamber, or I could hit the slide release lever, which will release the slide forward. So now the gun is loaded. Right? To unload the this particular one, the slide release button releases, the magazine release button releases the magazine. It pops out with the round still in there. Now there's still one in the chamber, very important. We rack the slide, again, finger off the trigger. I don't know if you saw that. The round popped out of the chamber. And that's what the slide does. It grabs the rim of the case, grabs it by the edge there, and it pulls it out. Not always reliably. You always want to check and be sure that it did in fact come out. Loading and unloading the handgun, and for pistol and revolver. Any questions?
Now, there's a little bit of a quick conversation on chat about whether one should slingshot the slide or use the slide release to rack or chamber that first round.
Yeah, I've heard some debate about that. I understand that there's a concern about some wear and tear by letting go with the slide release lever, because there's just a little piece of metal there that catches on this lever. And by continuing to push it down, let it slam home, there could be some wear concern there, versus the slingshot method. So if the slide is open, magazine is in, that method would be to just pull it back, releasing that lever, and then letting it go. I generally think that's the preferred option. That's what I do.
Yeah, I will say that to repair the slide lock on a Glock is a pretty simple, cheap thing to fix, though. So I wouldn't let that deter you.
Mm-hmm. There's some stuff that we might learn in like the defensive shooting class, which is a couple of classes above this. One of the reasons that folks recommend the slingshot method is it'll work across almost all semi-automatic firearms. So if you pick up a semi-automatic gun and you slingshot the slide, it's going to pop into battery and chamber around. Whereas if you don't know where the slide release is, maybe you shouldn't be touching the gun to begin with, but it's a, it's a fine mechanical thing rather than a gross mechanical skill. Manipulating a small lever versus grabbing the slide and slingshotting it are two different kinds of skills. That's more relevant in sort of that defensive shooting context, and we can explore that more with Al's class or in a later class, I think.
Yeah, bingo. That's an excellent point. One thing I did want to note is that this has a last shot hold open feature, which many modern semi-automatic pistols have, so that in normal
angle
shooting,
the camera down or pull the gun up.
Oh, sorry. In normal shooting, after each shot is fired, the slide will strip another live round off the magazine into the chamber, and it'll be ready to shoot again. On the last round, when the magazine is empty, it will lock open like so. This is typical of a lot of modern semi-automatic pistols. So that's why it kind of locks open on the last one as a visual indicator that, well, the gun's empty. So then the magazine could be released, a new full magazine could be inserted, and then as you pull it back and let it go, it will strip a new round off. In case that wasn't clear. Okay. Back to the slides. Okay, we've gone through the loading of the revolver, double action in this case. Unloading, we've gone through. Loading and unloading of the semi-automatic, we've gone through. Range, safety, and etiquette. A few words about this. Personal protective equipment, appropriate apparel, and identification. So, protective gear. I'm going to close the slide for a second so to show some of that off. These glasses I'm wearing are polycarbonate lenses. They're impact resistant. They usually satisfy most range requirements for safety, but they also have something like this. These actually are designed to fit over glasses, like so. Very fashionable. Slightly tinted, they're also polarized, and they offer good coverage around where seeing glasses might not. Ear protection, very important. These are just basic earmuffs that go over. We also have something like this. These are electronic earmuffs. See, there's a little dial here that turns them on. And these are handy because they attenuate the very loud, sharp sound impulses from a firearm, but you can still hear conversation. It's also a safety thing because if you're at a range, you want to hear range commands from the range officer or ceasefire commands. These in particular are very low profile, so they work well when shooting a rifle. A pistol, it doesn't really matter, but a rifle, you put your cheek on the stock, and the low profile keeps these out of the way. Now, whenever I go shooting, I always double up with little foam earplugs that go in the ears, and then the earmuffs can go right over those because hearing is important and you want it to last. Other considerations, apparel, a shirt that keeps the empty cases from going down the front. A revolver, after it's been fired, the cases remain in the cylinder. They don't go anywhere after they've been fired until you remove them. But a semi-automatic, with every shot, the spent case ejects out of this port and flies somewhere. This particular one likes to fly right back at me. I get a lot of these in the forehead. That's where a hat is nice to protect yourself from hot shell casings. A word here about safety. With semi-automatics, the cases are always flying around. So if somebody shooting next to you is close enough, that hot brass may come and land on you. I've had them land in between my temple and my glasses frame. So if you're at the range, it's important to recognize that you still have a loaded weapon. And if something hot lands, in your ear, down your top, or wherever, don't panic and flail around, because then you're moving the barrel in a direction that may not be safe. And the brass is never going to be so hot that it's going to cause permanent damage. It's not going to brand you with a little Smith & Wesson, crescent on your collarbone. I've had it happen many times. Just stay cool and, keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Let's see, other range safety issues. Identification. If you're at a private range with a member of that range, you'll want to have a guest tag on most often. Ceasefire and target change periods. A ceasefire is a very important command at any range, whether there are staffed by range safety officers or whether it's just private members. It is critical to obey the ceasefire command orders, so when a ceasefire is called, either with a blaring sound, sirens, or flashing lights, or verbal commands, or all of the above, immediately stop firing. Unload your weapon safely, keeping the barrel pointed in a safe direction, which is downrange. Take the magazine out, eject the loaded round if you have one in the chamber. Leave the action open, so don't, even though it's unloaded, don't close the action. If it's a bolt action rifle, leave the bolt open, or if it's a semi-automatic rifle, or if it's a semi-automatic pistol, or if it's a revolver, open the cylinder and leave it open like that on the table. Then put the weapon down, leave it there, and step back from that position so that everybody can see nobody is touching any weapon at all. Everybody's behind the firing line. And at that point, you'll either get a command or by mutual agreement, it's safe then to go down and change targets. Or sometimes ceasefire is called for a safety violation or a firearm malfunction, but it's a safety issue. And while the ceasefire is in effect, never, ever touch a firearm. It's dangerous and it makes everybody around you nervous. It's a safety issue as well as an etiquette issue. And then when the range is going hot, that command will be given, and then only then can you approach the firearm again and either continue firing or pack up to leave or whatever. So one common mistake a lot of new folks make is, well, I'm done shooting anyway, I'm just gonna pack up and go. No, once the ceasefire is called, there is no touching the firearms for any reason until the command has been indicated safe to do so. Let's see. Every range has its own set of rules. Many of them are similar, but be familiar with the rules anytime you go to a range, whether it's a private range, if you're going as a guest or a member, or a public range. The rules are usually very clearly posted. Generally, you can look at them online before you go to familiarize yourself. And that's always advised as a good thing to do. A lot of times there'll be special rules about holster work. Some ranges will have special holster days or a special holster range where you can practice drawing from a holster separate from everybody else, and able to do so in a safe manner. And then again, some ranges are what we consider to be a cold range, so that you, when you set foot on the range, your guns should be cased, unloaded, and only when you're at the firing line ready to shoot do you load your weapon. Basic ideas of being considerate to others. You'll find most folks at the range are very friendly, and many are more than happy to tell you about their weapon, about their shooting experience, and many would love to share. I know for the Liberal Gun Club, when we have range days, we love sharing what we brought to the range. But it's always important to talk first, don't touch, ask if it's okay to look or if it's okay to shoot, and basic politeness would indicate, offer to for them to shoot your weapon if they would like, use your target, shoot your own target instead of theirs, use your own ammunition, or offer your ammunition for them. These are just basic consideration ideas. And also being a good steward. Every gun owner is a representative of all of us. So wherever you're shooting, whether it's at a range or whether it's out in the forest, please be a good steward of the environment and a good representative of gun owners. Clean up after yourself, pick up your targets, pick up your brass, and leave the place at least as clean as you found it. Hygiene. Lead is a dangerous material. Oftentimes you get more lead exposure from the primer, the elements that are in the primer. This is a fake round, but the primer is that little guy in the middle there for a center fire round. It's around the rim for a rim fire round. But elements in there are mildly toxic with overexposure, and as well as handling rounds, lead bullets. Wash your hands. When you get home from the range, take your clothes off, put them through the wash. If you're someplace dusty, a lot of lead dust in open outside ranges can kind of blow up and get on you. It's potentially a health concern if you shoot a lot, especially as I do. So keep a good hygiene. Keep that stuff contained and washed. That's usually the first thing I do because I don't want to be going through the house around my daughter or family as I'm, kind of have the stuff clinging to me. And wash your hands thoroughly before eating anything after being at the range.
One little detail that I've been advised about hand washing is I've been told to use cold water instead of hot because that will keep your skin pores from opening up.
Yeah. That sounds like good advice. I don't know the epidemiological efficacy of that, but it seems reasonable to me. They also have lead wipes.
It's flipped. The best thing to do is just to make sure you use a good soap.
Yeah.
It's sort of like somebody said in the chat, thanks COVID-19, wash your hands.
Yes.
If you wash them with soap at the hot water versus the cold water, your hands are really, really thick in terms of membrane. Nothing's going to get in them. There are possibly weirder considerations when it comes to, say, blowing your nose or wiping your nose out with warm or cold water. But I'd been telling people that for years too, and I was told by a doctor that I was just wrong. So yeah.
That's, keep your hands washed. Basic hygiene. It's important. That'll help you avoid all kinds of stuff and not just lead. A little side note, I had my lead checked during my annual physical. They just tack it right onto the blood test. And I came in under the, whatever it is, 0.5 microgram, per liter threshold of safety. So easy to have it checked during your annual physical if you do that. All right, special considerations for indoor ranges. Other than being extremely loud, protect your ears, but also lead exposure. Ventilation is very important because it has a lot less place to go. Make sure that, a good range will have a draft going past you towards the front down range and suck all the smoke and residue away from you, so you're not sitting in it. Pay attention to that if you're ever at an indoor range. Okay. This concludes. We're going to end with the safety rules again. Always keep the barrel pointed in a generally safe direction. Keep your finger off the trigger and alongside the frame until you are ready to shoot. And always remember that you are in control of a weapon. And if used negligently, it may kill you or injure you or someone else. And that concludes the class. Any questions? Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Mike. One question did come up in terms of malfunctions that you might potentially run into at the range.
Yes, there are different kinds of malfunctions. There's a failure to eject, a failure to feed. There are actually slides and pictures that I deleted from this presentation to keep it within an hour time frame. But yes, those are considerations. There's also the something called a squib failure, and that's where the round fails to come out of the barrel, so it's stuck in there. Those are potentially dangerous because if it's stuck in there and you fire a new round behind it, it could be a catastrophic failure, really injuring you or somebody around you, or worse. Squib loads are dangerous. They're very rare. They've never happened to me, but they do happen on occasion. And they're usually characterized by a feel and a sound that's different from the usual sound that a live round makes when it leaves the barrel. They'll sound slightly muffled. You'll have less of a recoil. It'll feel different. It'll sound different. And if that happens, you'll want to, make the gun safe, eject the magazine, and, clear the weapon. What you don't want to do ever is look down the barrel to see if there's anything in there. Don't do that. I've seen that happen at the range, and I couldn't bear to look because it's extraordinarily dangerous and very bad. So never do that. If you suspect a squib round and you cannot look down the barrel from the back,
put the gun down.
Put it down, walk away, find somebody at the range to help you, a range safety officer or somebody. Fortunately, these Glocks are pretty easy to take apart. They just come apart in pieces, like so. The recoil spring, the barrel, and the slide.
Show us down the barrel. Maybe not. Oh yeah, there
we go.
There it is. There you go.
No squib load. No
And
squib round.
notice he's not pointing the barrel at himself at all.
Well, it's not anything in the gun. General with malfunctions is something we would cover if we're doing a live class. If the gun if the gun doesn't make the sound that you expected it to make, stop, keep it pointed down range, count a full second, maybe two, and then
30.
And then just set it down. Set it down with the muzzle down range. I actually had a Japanese Arisaka that had bad ammo that would hang fire, so it would make the click, and then a full 3-second count later it would discharge. So, but that's old ammo. That's all, there's all sorts of things, and that's something for an in-person when you do eventually, if you are new and you do go to the range, go with an instructor like Mike, be like Mike, and that we can walk you through it in person.
I think we got one last question regarding a break top revolver. When opening it after firing, should you not touch the barrel because it's going to be hot?
Yes.
The barrel will be hotter the more you shoot it. Sure, it could potentially be hot enough to hurt you. It may be uncomfortable. With a revolver, you can only shoot so many shots. I mean, 5, 6, 8, depending on the revolver. So, even if you shoot all of those rapid succession, it will feel warm to the touch, but it's not going to be dangerous to you generally.
If you got a break top revolver, you should be wearing those cool leather gloves anyway. So
yeah.
And often break tops, you're opening at the base of the cylinder area, not at the barrel area. So it's really, generally, you're not going to have the same heat at the cylinder area that you will at the barrel.
Yeah. So the guy in the chat that's got the RAF, the World War II RAF flying gloves, those are perfect for break tops. I'm going to go ahead and wanted to wrap up. There was one comment that I thought was worth pointing out. Don't forget to take your trauma kit to the range. Your instructors will likely have it. If you haven't watched the Stop the Bleed class from last week, taught by Lonnie, who was just talking, go out to YouTube and watch it because that's an important skill as well. Al said that there are two parts of it. You put holes in people and you fill them up. So I need to know both sides of the equation. If you're going to go to the range and you're going to be involved in the shooting sports, you want to know how to stop the bleed. So go watch that video as soon as you're done here, or at least tomorrow.
And just a quick shout out to not sure if it's pronounced Ruth or Ruthie. Great comment. Thank you so much. We're really super pleased that these have been enjoyable and informative to you as you're getting ready to shoot. Thank you.
Join us on Facebook. Join us on Discord. It's a community, so hang out with us and ask lots of questions.
Ask lots of questions. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody so they can all express their deep gratitude. This will be on YouTube as soon as Zoom processes the video and I get around to downloading it and uploading it back to YouTube, because there's a couple of steps, but it'll be on YouTube. There'll be more classes like this. I want to thank Mike for being our guinea pig instructor to actually teach the full class online for a live and not studio audience. And great job, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. So if you guys want to, don't say anything too rude. We're on video still.
Thanks, Mike. A great class.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Buddy, we appreciate you.
And we are off
Thank you,
camera.
Mike from North Carolina.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.